Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. Does salary matter? Today, in this episode, we're going to be talking about what the heck and why people are so obsessed with wages and salary when it comes to divorce. A lot of things that get bandied around at the moment are, well, I earned all the money, so I deserve the bigger property pool. Welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura. That was a nice introduction. Hello, everybody. Hello.
So look, I think we do get this question a lot online, a lot in the webinars that we do. We have a webinar coming up. If you're interested, everybody, you can go www.thedivorcecourse.com.au and go to the free webinar in the free resources section. Come along and learn way more than you can on our podcasts.
Yep.
So, Mum, salary, it does seem like everyone thinks it really matters at every stage of the process, but you're saying it doesn't.
It doesn't. It doesn't matter at all stages, but it's absolutely vital at some stages.
Okay, so let's talk through which stages matter and which stages don't. So let's start at the start. You've separated, you're negotiating the property pool, you've done that, and now you're negotiating percentages. Go and listen to our episode on Don't Argue Percentages. But you're trying to figure out the percentages and your ex is saying, well, you were the stay-at-home mum or you only worked part-time. I did all of this. My salary was huge, so I should get a bigger percentage of the property pool. Does that matter?
It doesn't matter, but a lot of people think it does.
Okay, so it doesn't.
It doesn't. So what the court, in a property settlement order, the first step is for the court to decide, is it fair to have actually move any of the property between the parties? But the next step is they look at, after they calculate the property pool, they look at contributions, and it'll be before, during and after the marriage. But whilst they're looking at financial contributions, or before, during and after cohabitation, I should say, living together, it doesn't really take into account salaries. So they're looking for lump sums.
Okay.
So if you were a cleaner, I always use this example, but if you were a cleaner at a hospital and your wife was a neurosurgeon, your wages would be wildly different, right? Or if you're a car wash person, or, so wildly different. And I have seen letters from lawyers who ought to know better.
Are you serious?
Yeah, where they set out each year's salary. Our client brought in this much money and your client only brought in this much money, which is just poppycock, really.
Okay, so you're saying that it doesn't matter how much one person earns over the other person, really.
During a marriage.
So during the marriage, from when you're married or when you
start living together,
start living together, if one person's earning heaps and you're not earning much, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't give them a bigger share of the property pool. In fact, that's a nice segue into the next bit, which is where it does matter is into the future. What is your ex-partner's earning capacity compared to your earning capacity? And that, remember the word capacity.
Yes.
Right.
So can you talk us through, so you're saying it doesn't matter in that bit, but it does matter when looking at percentage for future needs.
Yes.
And we've got an episode on future needs if you'd like to go to www.thedivorcecourse.com.au/blog and you can go and find our future needs episode. But what you're saying, Mum, is it doesn't matter there, but then when it comes to deciding who needs a bit more of the money
for future needs. Yeah, under Section 75(2). Yep.
And so then, wait a minute. So that means, and then it's saying if someone has got an earning capacity, they're making heaps of money.
Say they're earning $300,000.
And then the cleaner's not earning much.
Yeah.
They've got a greater need, so they should get a bigger share of the
cleaner should get a bigger share of the property pool by and large.
So there's a big brain mess going around with people thinking, well, if that person's earning all the money and that person's got the bigger salary, they should get the bigger split in the percentage. Yeah. But it's actually the other way around.
It is.
So if you earn less, your future needs probably are, depending on all the other factors that you need to go listen to that episode for, you probably need a bigger share.
A bigger share of the property. That's right. And so...
Wow. So can you explain to us then what this future needs when it comes to salary? Do they just say, oh, well, because you can't earn that much, you need to get a little bit more because it's not fair?
That's right. That's right. So the steps of the process. 1, does the court need to make an order? 2, value the property pool. Step 3, look at your contributions, and that doesn't include salary. You don't include your salary at the beginning or during or after separation. But step 4, when they look at your future needs, it was explained to me once in a lecture years ago, and I've never forgot it. It's like the court takes a crystal ball and has a look and say, if we divide the property solely on the basis of contribution, which you'll remember not including salary, but extra big lump sums in like inheritances, personal injuries claims, whatever. If we divide the property pool solely on contributions, how is person 1 going to be in 10 years' time? How's person 2 going to be in 10 years' time? And the person with the massive salary, the neurosurgeon, even if, by the way, the neurosurgeon
we'll
says...
talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. The neurosurgeon.
Yes.
They'll say they don't need as much.
They don't need it.
They'll
They're
be fine in 10
future
years.
needs, they will be absolutely fine in 10 years. Only the cleaner is not going to be, because that's all he can earn. That's his capacity to earn. So that's what they look at, and they give you extra for the future to try and balance that up. They don't want to make it absolutely equal. No one's going to run a ruler over and say, well, $300,000 a year for 10 years is $3 million, and she's only going to have, or he's only going to have 3 years at 80, 240. They don't do that, but there is an adjustment. You're not supposed to have, under future needs, there's no requirement to have the same lifestyle that you had when you were together, but it needs to be sufficient to support yourself.
Okay, so we've hit that big myth on the head. That's a big boo-ha. If anyone starts going, well, I earned the most, so I get the bigger share of the property pool.
Just save your breath.
Say whatever. But then I hear another thing where they say, well, my ex is a neurosurgeon and they've quit their job, so that when we go to court, his earning capacity his salary is zero. And I'm a primary school teacher, and I'm earning, $72,000 a year. Does that mean his future needs are now more important than my future needs?
No, because this word should be written in gold in the Family Law Act. Capacity.
Capacity to
earn.
So what does capacity to earn mean?
It means what you reasonably could expect to be earning with your qualifications and your availability, depending on how many kids you've got and your location. So it's not uncommon for an affidavit to be filed showing all these jobs that a person could apply for if only they wanted to work full-time, or that someone goes on Seek and prints out all the neuroscientists or neurosurgeons' jobs with a rough idea of their salary. So the court, or you can go on to the Bureau of Statistics and work out what they could be earning. But, it's a deliberately stop working.
How often do you see people quitting their jobs in an attempt to try and lower their salary so that they think they're going to get a bigger percentage?
So often.
How is that a common myth that's floating around there people don't know about then?
Well, it's a little word, isn't it? And I think people are getting their advice from other friends and so forth.
Right.
And also too, I think, let's say our neurosurgeon lady goes to a lawyer to find out where she stands and what she's going to have to pay her cleaning husband out of the property pool. And her lawyer will say to her, your salary is high. Therefore, under Section 75(2) and the equivalent under de facto legislation in there, Section 90 something, he will have to get a bigger percentage of the property pool than you. So again, that person probably only just hears the bit that says
salary.
She gets more, or he gets more than me because of my job, so she quits and thinks that solves that problem. You'd have to be pretty nasty. It's called cutting your nose off to spite your face.
Just imagine that, quitting your job, then basically making yourself poor, going to court and then finding out, oh no, because you have a capacity to earn, you still are going to get a smaller amount
because
of the property pool.
Because, of course, the day after the trial, they might go back into another job. So
what did judges say? What did judges say when they find these kind of people?
Oh, well, they can't say much. They just have to operate within the law.
Right.
But they can say things like, I discount the suggestion that the wife is only able to earn this. She actually has capacity. I find that she has capacity to earn at the previous rate, and the fact that she's chosen to leave her job at the moment is not relevant.
Right. So if they choose to not work for a lifestyle reason, then but it'd be different if they, I don't know, say got cancer or
that's different.
So, and then, Mum, there are other factors, aren't they, as well, other than just what your capacity to earn is when it comes to percentage split for future needs. There's a whole
There's a whole raft of them,
and
whether you've
put
got
that episode
care
in the
children,
show notes. Yeah.
Age, state of health of the parties. If you've got another person under 18, you've got an obligation to look after.
So there's a whole lot of other
stack
stuff.
of them, all to be found in 75(2).
So when it comes to salary, it doesn't matter when it comes to percentage split apart from future needs.
Yeah.
Which if you have the lower salary, then it's to your advantage to have the lower salary, basically.
Well, it is.
Or the lower capacity to earn.
That's right. As long as you don't sort of cut your hours down.
Yeah.
And say, I can't earn any more. The court's going to have a look at the last year or two of your salaries. Generally, the truest indication of a person's ability to earn is the tax return they filed the year before they bust up.
Okay. All right. Is that what they look at?
Yes, because honestly, people start rearranging their lives to sort of benefit.
And I guess that's that delay tactics, that episode we've done, where for some reason that there seems to be some jerk playbook where they think, okay, I'll do this and I'll do this, and if I do this and this and this, then they won't be able to get any money. So they, quit their job, they hide their assets, they run their business to the ground.
Have another baby.
They have another baby, or whatever it is that they do, all these dirty tactics to try and make to stop. These are the manipulative and controlling
That's right.
people.
This is the spiteful stuff people do.
But it bites them in the butt.
Yes, it will when you go to trial. So don't let your lawyer get involved in who earned what.
Yeah.
Because want to know the rationale behind it, Laura? The rationale behind it is, going back to my neuroscientist woman, she could not have worked the hours that she did and been on call and maybe even done her training if her husband hadn't been carrying the load to some extent at home, even if he didn't work outside the home at all. Their contributions are of a financial nature. They can be, they're also under Section 79 and Section 90, a non-financial nature, and there is a separate one for the parenting and homemaking role.
Right.
And the cases since way back in 1978, Mallett's case, Mallet's case, says that you don't diminish the value of a person's role by what it is they're doing compared to what another person's doing. And it set it out very clearly that both the neurosurgeon and the stay-at-home dad or the cleaner were contributing everything they had to the marriage. And it's a partnership, and the court doesn't unpick that. It was a decision they made at the time. Now we're looking at going forward. They look at what came into the marriage. They ignore mostly what happens during, unless there's an injection of funds from an inheritance or something. And then they look at what you're going to be like going forward.
So if you're at home freaking out, or if your ex has written you a letter saying, I earned this much while we were married, so I deserve this much of the property pool, don't stress, and you can refer them to the sections of the Act.
Yes, now, and the cases. And refer them to Mallet. This has been decided.
This has been decided, Mallet's case. So capacity to earn is going to be your favourite word if you've got an ex like this, for sure. Now, Mum, does this also fit in with child support?
Yes, it does.
So when you've got a poopy ex who's shirking their responsibility for their own children by quitting their job to not earn money, to file a tax return that's nothing of reflecting what they should be earning or what they could be earning, what happens in that instance? Because that's a different act.
It is. The Child Support Act is a Commonwealth Act, and it's different. What they take into account is your earning capacity and your ex's earning capacity. And this, the neuroscientist who quit her job gets a double bonus, she thinks, because A, she doesn't have to give extra property to her husband, and B, she'll pay less child support. So you can be sure that there are many, many, many cases of people who simply resign their position, blame it on stress, and try to manipulate the system like that. There are people who, if they run their own business, suddenly the business hits hard times, and do look at that with a little bit of a slitty eye suspicion sometimes. Having said that, there are a lot of businesses going badly at the moment that have done well for decades. But they can also manipulate how they receive their money. They might take it as drawings, or they might keep it in the company and have the company pay their expenses. So on paper, their tax return is that they've only earned 20 or 30,000 or something. So those are grounds for appeal to the child support, or a review, I mean. So you ring them up and you say, hey, just so you know, she was earning, $700,000 a year or $300,000 a year before we split up. And she could earn it again, and she's just not. And they can take into account that, whether the ground, I think, is exactly, you'll see it on the Child Support website. Services Australia has a guide, but essentially you would appeal it on one of the 8 grounds. I think there's 9 grounds now, and it is that their tax return is not a proper reflection of their income, assets, and capacity to earn. And then they'll have a look and they can go back a bit further because the Child Support Agency is a Commonwealth body. They can look at tax returns, they can look at super. And so, yeah. And there's forms to do it. It's not hard to fill in the objection. I think it's mostly done online these days.
Yes, but it sucks. So filling in forms is very hard and annoying for anyone. So I'm sure it's not the greatest thing. But what you're saying is the child support has seen this before.
Oh, my hat. Yes, chucks a job. That's not original.
Yeah.
It's you can imagine. And once I remember when the Child Support Act came out in about 1988, 89, and I was talking to someone at Child Support and he said, there must be hundreds of people, I'm sure it's thousands now, going clockwise around Australia to avoid earning money, doing handyman jobs by cash to avoid paying money. And I said, well, that's terrible. And he said, that's all right. They have to stop sometime. We'll get them.
And look, and we are mindful that there are changes coming to the Family Act, the Child Support Act.
So they say.
So that should be coming through at some point. We'll
it's
do
just
an update.
a bill at the moment. We don't want to confuse anyone in case it doesn't go through in its current form.
Yeah.
But people are looking at it and there's billions of dollars in child support debt owed and the PM's looking to sort that through. So it'll be good when it happens. I'll watch with interest.
Yeah, we will both watch with interest.
Yeah.
So, Mum.
We'll keep you updated, guys.
So when someone is a stay-at-home mum, they don't need to be worried.
Yep.
If someone's a stay-at-home dad, they don't need to be worried.
No.
If you both have equal salaries, it doesn't matter anyway.
That's right. That argument doesn't happen usually.
So the word salary doesn't really come into it apart from future needs.
That's right. And then the court may well find if you're both sort of registered nurses, you both earn about the same money, sufficient to support yourself. So it's not a factor even in the future needs.
You're invited to our free webinar. Whether you're stuck at the beginning of deciding to divorce or you're struggling to find your way through the legal jargon and fear of the unknown of the legal process, we are here to empower you to take control. Join us to learn what steps you can take, followed by a live Q&A where you get Lynn, my amazing mum and family law accredited specialist, to answer your questions. All you have to do is go to www.thedivorcecourse.com.au and click on Reserve My Seat. We'll see you there. Hurry, spaces are limited, so don't miss out. Register today. So the word salary doesn't really come into it apart from future needs.
That's right. And then the court may well find if you're both sort of registered nurses, you both earn about the same money, sufficient to support yourself. So it's not a factor even in the future needs. And it isn't a factor when you get together, you know.
So if you're listening today and you're one of those people that have written in and said, I've tried to figure out how much my salary contribution would have been, don't worry about that.
Yep.
Because there's such a thing as non-financial contribution.
Yes.
And if you are a stay-at-home parent, that is a very significant.
And the role so there's 2 aspects: non-financial contributions, like supporting someone while they're studying, you know, like having people over for dinner that you didn't like. We've had that in cases years ago, just to support a husband, usually in those days, through a career.
Business stuff, yeah.
Yep. And then there's the parenting and homemaker role that you have done or someone has done to allow the other person to devote themselves to working in a higher paid job or whatever. It's not nothing.
Now, you mentioned, and I want to touch on this, you mentioned that the future needs isn't basically trying to adjust it so that you can continue living the way you were living.
That's right.
You kind of do have to probably face the fact you might have to get a job. Yep. Now, we've done an episode on gold diggers because we have heard some people saying, look, I've got this ex, they've never worked. They didn't help with the house. They didn't help with the kids. I went to work. I looked after the kids. They just sat on the couch and gambled or played video game. Those people do have to go get a job at some point.
You'd think so. So the court doesn't suggest that you should be providing for a non-active person for the rest of their lives.
Right.
That was the case years ago where traditionally, back in the early 80s, the women didn't have the higher education and they stayed at home and supported the husband who usually had the higher occupation and brought the money in. And I remember an early case where it was a bank manager's wife and she didn't know anything about money. She was completely blindsided by the separation. And we got an order for her for the rest of her life.
Oh, wow.
But not today. That's not going to happen today. You will, unless you have a real illness, the court will try to, or some reason, the court will try to satisfy that with a lump sum adjustment to you in the property pool and maybe a contribution of maintenance or alimony going forward for as long as it would take you to either retrain or do something else. So I'm sure they still make open-ended spousal maintenance orders. And under the Act, the spousal maintenance orders end when you repartner.
Right.
Used to be on remarriage, And some orders, they'll make spousal maintenance because those early desperate stages when there's all these bills that come in and the person with the biggest amount of income isn't contributing, then on an interim basis, the court orders spousal maintenance a lot more often, and sometimes it only lasts until property settlement.
All right, so if you're stuck at home, you're not earning any money, your ex is earning heaps of money, but you're still squabbling, like having to pay the bills and all the mortgage and all of that, you can go and apply for spousal maintenance and that'll keep you kicking along.
That's education only.
But that should...
But that's how the court does it.
And that would go and see a lawyer, get some legal advice, but that's how the court will support you until you get a property settlement.
And can we talk about deep pockets?
Okay, let's talk about deep pockets, Mother.
So a person on that big salary, they've got the money to hire the lawyers.
Yes, that's what I wanted to ask.
Yep.
So how does salary then affect your justice? Because if they're earning if that lady's earning $300,000 a year and you've got no money, they go and get the best lawyers ever, and you've got no lawyer. How do you fix that?
And obviously their lawyers are not interested in you getting a bigger share of the property pool because you don't have the capacity to earn as much or you can't actually support yourself. So to create a level playing field, the court has, I guess, evolved this process of interim costs so that you can apply to the court for some of the money that they've got to come into your hands so you can pay a lawyer.
Right.
Now, legal costs, your expenses of lawyers, that always comes off your share. So if he's spending or she's spending, like $40,000 every time you go to court and you've just got a solicitor or you're having to do it yourself, that $40,000 is taken off. That's counted as property he's already had from the pool. If there's a massive property pool or even a fairly like one that sustains your ex having barristers and lawyers at everything, then there should be enough then for you to have some to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what they call about deep pockets. And you'll hear it often about organisations in litigation. They'll say, I was going to argue it, but they've got deep pockets. They've got so much more money than I have, and it never runs out.
Right. So that's how you rectify that issue.
Yeah,
if your ex has got all that money and deep pockets and you're worried about justice.
And there are a couple of strands of it. I think we've talked about it on a podcast before. You can either ask for a lump sum. If there isn't a lump sum to be found, you might ask for a certain amount every week from the bigger salary person to put towards your bills. And if you're absolutely desperate to find cash and there isn't any, and yet they are hiring these lawyers, the court can make an order, and they have done in the past, that the person, every time that person with the deep pockets pays their lawyer something, they pay the same amount into your lawyer's trust account. That one's harder to police, though.
So there's an episode called Balancing the Unbalanced, and we talk about how to try and make it fair in the justice space, going through court and family law and all of that, when there is obviously way more money on one side than there is on the other.
Yeah, a big power imbalance.
There is a power imbalance. And it is sometimes, like you say, Mum, if they've got the big salary and you're the one with nothing, they're not in any urgent need to settle, to get property settlement going. They're happy. They're still clicking along. It's the person who is unbalanced, who has the less,
unsupported,
desperate for property settlement.
And so
they can move on with their lives.
That's right. And so they need money for food as well and things. So the risk is that the person who doesn't have enough money to support themselves will agree to anything just to get some cash, or the person who's prepared to give them cash wants them to sign a whole raft of orders to say they're not getting anything else. And really, if you need spousal maintenance to live on, just to pay for general living expenses, they don't get added back in to the property pool. But if you pay it for lawyers, then you're taken to have had that share. And what you look at is overall, look at all of the property there is. It doesn't belong to the other person alone.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that, even if it's in their name, if you've built it up together, it doesn't belong all to them. So you're just getting a little bit of what you will ultimately be entitled to. General advice, only go and talk to education, but go and talk to someone about it and see what scope you've got to arrange.
Because I guess psychologically, and then from the people that ask this question, they're already thinking, well, it's all theirs. I'm being lucky that they're giving me a bit. They did all the hard work. They earned all the money. So it's all theirs. And if you're in a manipulative and controlling relationship, then you probably do feel maybe guilt asking for it, or you feel like you're unworthy of it, or maybe you feel like you're asking for something and you should be ever grateful for them to give you a little bit. Yeah. But that's not the attitude.
Not the case, no. And you may have been conditioned over the relationship, with every conversation, with every time that you subordinate what you want to do for the good of him or the family and whatever, that can give you a mindset that's unhelpful. And I think of it like a butterfly, and the wings are just sort of drying out and opening up, because when you realise that you actually have a life and it is your life to live, it's just the best freedom. One really manipulative trick I've heard of is, and I think this person was a real narcissist, and I've come across it before, is where they say to you, oh, my ex-wife ripped me off, but you're not that sort of person, and then so throughout the whole relationship,
then they're trying to weave that narrative, don't you dare rip me off either. Don't you?
Not even threatening, but the poor me. Yeah. I've been ripped off by my ex-wife. I can barely afford to live, so I'll come and live in your house. And yes, and so you cannot be softened up by that. And a lot of people feel, I don't want to be like those people, that woman.
I don't want to be like his ex-wife.
And she's probably never met the ex-wife or ex-husband, but you don't want to be like that. A narcissist, manipulative, controlling person will make you feel that if you do pursue what you're absolutely entitled to pursue, that
you're just like them.
Yes, and that their estimation of you will go down, and it's real. You've got to get over that hurdle in your own head.
That's tricky,
because they'll throw that at you.
And I guess with a high conflict person, the best way to shut down this argument that I earn more money than you and here's my salary for the last 10 years is just educate them.
Yeah, just send them the case. Just say it doesn't matter. Go and ask someone. It just
go and see a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because that shuts it down. Because I guess until people are educated, it breaks my brain sometimes when I see it. When someone rings me up and says, "Hey, Laura, I'm about to get a divorce," and their understanding of what property settlement is or what they're entitled to is so off the mark to what you've told me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, go listen to this episode. Go listen to this episode and then I've found some people have even been arguing for the last 2-3 months over something that isn't even what the court would even consider.
And it can be that you personally are talking to our listeners, it could be that you as a listener are pursuing a course of argument that actually doesn't matter.
Doesn't have legal standing.
It's not going to change anything, even if you do establish this fact.
You cheated. You're the one who cheated.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, the court doesn't care.
Or every time we went to get petrol, you wouldn't pay, I had to pay, and we went in my car. A lot of that stuff just doesn't matter. And you need to address your hurt feelings over some of these things, because it's devastating when the court or your lawyer says, don't put that in, it doesn't count.
So we've got an episode called Things That the Court Doesn't Care About, and we do talk you through those main ones that people always bring up. So go and look in the show notes on our website, thedivorcecourse.com.au, in the blog section to see if you can have a listen to those things if you're worrying about what other things you think matter that don't. So with a high conflict, you just shut down the argument by giving them the case.
Yep. Or suggesting they get legal advice.
Once someone gets the legal advice, it does help settle things down. And going and getting legal advice doesn't mean you're signing up to go to court. It just means finding out from a legal brain what the court would probably say you're entitled to.
It's like you'd go take a car to a mechanic.
Yeah.
You don't try guessing what needs to be done until the mechanic sees it.
So then with an avoidant mum, with this salary argument, avoidant person isn't going to really want to know that this is the truth.
If they're okay, they're okay.
Yeah.
And you may have to push a bit harder, do the mediation offering, do your letter about genuine steps, and just crank up the pressure so that they do go and see somebody.
Yeah. Because if your ex is avoidant and they're also the one that makes all the money,
it's a recipe for disaster.
you're in big trouble because you're stuck. You're stuck until you can get things moving. So if you've got an avoidant ex, you have to get the ball moving there.
And you also have to keep your deadlines. We did talk about that. When you have a deadline, do a time and a date. Don't just say within 10 days, and follow through. If you've said, if you don't do that, then we're going to do that.
Well, we have a great episode called How to Divorce a Statue. So Mum talks you through the process of doing the whole property settlement, even if they don't say a word to you ever. So you could go listen to that if you're pulling your hair out. And lastly, amicable, Mum, I guess if it's amicable and you point out to them actually salary doesn't matter during the marriage, it only matters for afterwards.
And they go, gosh darn it. And then in our fantasy amicable thing, well then, do you need some money to pay for your lawyers?
Yes, that would be great. That
and
would
you see it occasionally.
amicable.
You do see it occasionally.
Good.
They put money in a joint account for wages, or they keep for legal fees, or they keep paying a number of expenses.
Oh, that would be
Just
lovely.
be careful though that the amicable offer to pay your expenses and do this, do that is not kind of like a honey trap. And you're a bird in that gilded cage, and you can't make decisions for yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And probably I would think that what they're offering to pay you, I think you might be surprised when you look at child support and perhaps what you're entitled to as spousal maintenance, it might only be what they're offering to pay you anyway. So I use those letters as proof to the court that he's got capacity to pay or she's got capacity. Look, they offered this money, but I don't want it to be intruding into my life. I want my own money. I want that money, and then I'll pay the rates and rent and insurance without conditions, without constantly being in contact. And an amicable person might mean that with a kind heart, and they'll be happy to just give you the amount instead. So you do make your own choices. But a coercive, controlling person probably prefer to be the one that pays your rent so they can do good boy, good girl, bad girl. Oh, you're going to take me to court, are you? Well, I'm not paying the rent.
This
or I'm not paying the rent, or I'm going to be 2 days late.
Yeah. Look, I think the whole argument about money and who earned it and who brought stuff in, I'm glad that the court does do that blanket approach where they're like, we don't care what happened in the middle of the marriage from the start to the end, because really that was your decision.
Yes, you allowed it, you didn't allow it, whatever happened, it was in your time.
And otherwise it would be a huge mess.
Yeah.
It would be a massive mess. And I think knowing that it only matters after the fact that you've separated, it's important though to know when was your separation day, because that can become an argument. But I think it's comforting for those who are going, crap, does salary really matter? For those who are, you know, on the lower side of the salary scale, don't panic. It doesn't mean you're going to miss out because you did as much contributions as they did.
And if you're the person who's going, I brought all the money in, I was the breadwinner, well, you know, now you know if you were holding out for extra because of that, have a little look at it and you'll have to just accept that that's not going to fly. You're better for me to sort of tell you to go look it up and find out about it, that it might be a problem for you, than to spend all that money, go through all those days, go to court, and the judge goes, of course it doesn't matter. You know, so I think if you're stuck, sometimes it's your own misconception. I agree mostly though, especially with avoidant. It's probably the other party, but, you know.
Make sure it's not you.
Make sure it's not you.
Yeah. Well, I hope that answers your question to the person who wrote in just the other day. I was like, we need to answer this one because we get this a lot. So there's no need to be sitting down trying to figure out what value your homemaker salary would have been if it was a salary. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to realise that what happened in the marriage happened in the marriage. It stays in the marriage as a combined thing, unless it's inheritances and things like that.
The court does look at the extent to which this is your non-financial contribution. You've supported that person to work. And I've had matters where a person's got their medical qualifications during the marriage and then they break up and you're like,
Oh, great. I paid for you and looked after you while you got your degree, and now you've gone off.
And one of the factors is, I was talking about age, state of health, the things that they look forward to going forward, look at for your future needs. One of them is the extent to which the person whose maintenance is under consideration has assisted or helped the person who is to be the payer to obtain their qualification. Now, I think that's almost word for word out of the Act, and it's a bit clunky, but basically if someone studied every night while you were together, or, going to the union and you keeping things going, or you've worked to support them while they're studying, then that is a non-financial contribution on your behalf.
Yeah. So don't stress.
No.
It's all good.
It's very nuanced. And I think I'm going to say this. I think in property settlement, if it seems unreasonable, and it probably is.
Yes.
The court, I think this Act has been working well. We haven't changed the percentages in property in the Family Law Act for blooming years, or those contribution issues. I think they're going to change it now and put them all into one section, Section 79. But for the time being, you'll find it in Section 75 too.
Before we go, I think we should probably do a review.
Oh, I love that.
Mum loves all the reviews that we get, and we are absolutely loving the love you give back to us through Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube. If you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, please go support us by subscribing to YouTube. You don't have to watch our videos, just be a subscriber. That would be great, because we're newbies on YouTube, and we're thinking about doing some actual serious videos on the new changes to the Family Law Act as well. So if you're interested, definitely go and subscribe to us so you can find out. But this review today is called Perfect Timing. I stumbled across this podcast somehow and have not stopped listening. At the moment, going through post-separation abuse and alienation, and this podcast is just the brightest light of hope. Lynette's thoughtful and wise words and gorgeous bond between the mother and daughter. So that's Lisa. If you are listening, Lisa, you can send us an email at thedivorcecourspodcast@gmail.com, and we will arrange a free call to chat with Mum. So if anybody else would like to have a free chat with Mum, we try to choose one review a month, and you can review us on Spotify, Apple, or you can even, I don't know if you can review on YouTube. I have to figure that out.
It's comments on YouTube.
Comments, okay, yeah. So maybe just stick it to Apple and Spotify. But again, thank you for keeping us in the loop with things. If you've got an episode idea you'd like us to do, if you've got a question that you've heard other people asking, we can answer it here for you and hopefully make your journey a little bit less stressful.
Yeah.
But please always go and see a lawyer. Get your own independent legal advice, as each legal situation is different. But thank you, Mum. Thank you for your time.
No worries, Laura. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.